Revisiting my dreams with the king.
Welcome to the ride, a journey to your dreams. I'm your host, Johnnie King III, aka Still Chill Leroy, and this is the Revisit Your Dreams podcast right here on YouTube.com. I am very excited today. I have a very special guest in house today. I'll get to the introduction of this guest very shortly, but I want to let you know what we're doing here at Revisit Your Dreams. Our mission is to motivate, to encourage, to inspire, to share knowledge and wisdom, and to explore real life testimonies of trial, error, and success, and maybe even provide a few laughs along the way. Today's episode is titled Make It Work. Your gifts are keys to the dream. My very special guest today is an actor, a writer, pastor and life coach, a public speaker, and a college administrator. He was featured in the independent film In Search of Liberty and in the major motion picture Mara. His passionate work includes service as a student aid professional at University of California, Davis. He also wrote and released his first book, Faith Strong, in 2024, and his second book, Divorcing the Church to Marry God, released earlier this month. He's a graduate of Sacramento State University, a former classmate, a former teammate, and a fellow graduate of Vallejo High School Apache's class of 1992. Please welcome to the show my very special guest, Coach Montre Everett.
Man, it's a pleasure to be with you. Class of 92, Vallejo High Apache, stand up.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And, they want to take the Apaches out the mix because of, political things and reasons, but, we're
Right.
Apaches for life as far as I'm concerned.
Hey, once an Apache, always an Apache, bro.
That's it, man. I like to start off the show letting people know a little bit. Each episode, I like to introduce how I know each guest. Every guest that I'm interviewing because I know them personally in some way. I've either met them at a networking event, social networks, went to school with them, family members, friends, co-workers, things like that. Of course, we just mentioned our relationship. We went to Vallejo High School together, played JV baseball together, and Montre went on to do well in varsity baseball and even low college baseball, semi-pro. But we were also in Tanner, toured the country together on an HBCU tour.
Yes, sir.
So I do remember those moments. Montre, you have any feedback on our relationship, how we met, anything like that?
Man, I mean, we met in high school, man, and been tight ever since, man. And, man, we shared a lot of good moments, man. Our time in high school, I look back on it with so many fond memories, man. Whether it's on the baseball field, whether we're in the classroom, whether we're traveling with Tanner, whatever it was, man. I even remember we ended up running into each other at Summer Jam 1992.
Yeah.
Summer Jam, the concert.
The Cameo Summer Jam, I remember that.
Yeah, Cameo Summer Jam. And so we've always found ways to link up, man. And here it is. Man, 30 plus years, man, and we still find ways, to stay connected and our bond, man. This is for life, bro. So I'm just blessed that our paths crossed, in the early 90s, and God still finds ways for us to stay connected here in the 2020s.
2020s amongst everything. Yeah, that's dope. I appreciate that. And the reason why I asked that question, and the reason why I want people to talk about how we met. One, I like the audience to kind of get an idea of, the commonality between the two of us, but also to real talk, sometimes you bring up stuff that I forget. The people that I'm interviewing, because of the relationship I have with them, they'll bring up stuff that I didn't recall. So I appreciate you bringing that up because it reminds me of Cameo Summer Jam, and I do have that memory. Yeah. If you hadn't said that, I wouldn't have related a moment of Cameo Summer Jam with Montre Everett, but now I do remember that moment. So I appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hey, man, we come from a very unique little city in the Northern Bay Area called Vallejo, California. so many individuals from our city have made successes of themselves in different avenues. But the list is lengthy, especially when it comes to sports and entertainment. Her, the singer, E40, Mac Dre, Mac Mall, La Russell now,
Yeah.
Confunction, CC Sabathia, baseball player,
Yes.
Jeff Gordon. The list just goes on and on. We could just run it down, right? Right.
Legends.
A bunch of them. You grew up there. I grew up there. What is it about growing up in Vallejo that creates this kind of creative momentum that's evident in the people that have come that made it our city in like athletics and entertainment and things like that? What is it about Vallejo that you think creates that uh, that foundation in us that allows those type of people to rise out of our city?
Yeah, man. Vallejo is, or should I say, when we were growing up, Vallejo was like this place unlike anywhere else. Of course, the Bay Area is the Bay Area, and of course, we got a lot of the Bay Area in us. But Vallejo is still, it has its own unique identity. And one of the things, well, it's actually two things that I see that just create so much great talent. And a lot of people don't know all of this great talent comes from Vallejo. I've told people that Vallejo is like Detroit was in the '60s with Motown when it comes to music. And Vallejo was like the entire state of Texas or Florida when it comes to sports, and how we can create and crank out so many great sports legends and great talent. But the thing is, the two things that I think when it comes to Vallejo is, one, we had an amazing family dynamic growing up in Vallejo. Like our parents and our grandparents, they passed down gifts, talents, or maybe not even just the gifts and talents, but just put the seed in us. When it comes to music, I believe, you and I for sure, and many other people from Vallejo, we have a wide, you know, range of accepting different types of music and knowing different types of music, because our parents was passing down music like the Shy Lights and the Impressions and all these groups from the 40s all the way to the 70s. And so we grew up every Saturday morning, cleaning the house, we listening to this music, we listen, and we watching Soul Train, and we going to the family picnics, and they playing these jams. And so this is embedded in us. And so once we get older and have a little musical talent of our own, we pull from that. And so you see somebody like E40 who's bringing in not only his own sound, but also you hear some of that old 70s funk in his music. You see the same thing. Shout out and rest in peace to Mac Dre. You heard the same thing from him. You even see it from her, with her stylings on the guitar. There were so many bands coming out of Vallejo, such as Confunction, such as Sly Stone. You hear a lot of that in her music, and it's only because of the generation before her gave her that seed, gave us that seed. And with Vallejo it being just a melting pot of diversity. We had friends of every race, color, religion, you name it. And it was nothing for us to be at our Mexican friend's house one day, our Filipino friend's house the next day, our Chinese friend's house the next day, our white friend's house on Friday. It was nothing for that. Yep. And so when I say Vallejo, there's no place like that. When you think of a truly American melting pot, that's what Vallejo was. And it was a safe, it may not be that way now just because times have changed, but it was a safe space for us. I remember growing up, I would literally walk from one side of Vallejo to the other, and my parents weren't worried about me because they knew somewhere along the way, someone would see me, someone would check on me, someone would ask me if I needed a ride, and give me a ride if I wanted one. And so Vallejo is a special place. I'm blessed to be born and raised there, and it has placed so many seeds in me that I hope that I'm now harvesting some of those seeds that were planted in me, back in the late '70s, early '80s.
Yeah, yeah. I believe that your current position in life and what you're doing is kind of a reflection of what comes out of Vallejo. As the reason I asked that question is because, you too, and, you have risen out of Vallejo. I have risen out of Vallejo. When I say risen, I don't mean you left Vallejo and Vallejo is such a bad place that we had to leave it. It just
Yeah.
means that such a small place, and it's so competitive as such a small place that everybody there has some gifts and talents and stuff to bring. So when you're able to see yourself in that competition, and despite the competition factor still keep rising, it's something special about that place. It's something special
Yeah.
about Vallejo to me, when you have an athlete like, maybe say, CC Sabathia, who has made it to the Hall of Fame, was a
Yeah.
Cy Young Award winner, was the highest paid pitcher in baseball at one time, was a finals MVP at one time. Like, when you see someone accomplish those great things, and you translate the nature of where they came from to having a huge part of developing them and developing that spirit and developing that fortitude to keep going and pushing forward their goals and dreams. To me, there's something special about Vallejo. I don't even know how to describe it. I've been asking a lot of people this. I appreciate you telling me that, because I have a hard time explaining why, but it's a lot of stuff that comes out of Vallejo. But anyway, I appreciate that. I think you are representing those things that have come out of Vallejo by you just being individually you, and you doing and pursuing life in your own way. Vallejo has always been about independently being unique and being themselves, even though we have a foundation that we've come from, and Confunction and Sly Stone and other
Yeah.
athletes that we can look forward to. Everyone has found their own lane. Every single person out of Vallejo has not done it the same way as someone else has done it, but yet used what they've seen to rise. Let's go back to life as a youngster growing up in Vallejo. For Montrey, what were some of Montrey's biggest dreams as a young kid growing up in Vallejo? And did those dreams change during your high school or college years, or do you still have the same dreams that you had when you were a younger kid?
Yeah, man. It's definitely been a few transitions of the dreams. Growing up in Vallejo, uh, it's easy to say that it was a baseball factory, in especially in the 80s and 90s. I started playing Little League baseball. Well, even before Little League baseball, my dad put a bat in my hand at the age of 3, and he saw the talent in me then. And every day when he got off of work, he said, "Let's go." We were going out in the yard and playing strikeout. I know the young cats today, they didn't know what that is, but back in the day we played strikeout. And he would have me out in the yard every single day honing that craft. And as I got old enough to play Little League, he put me in Little League, and my talents started to grow. Had some great mentors and coaches in Vallejo, real stand-up men who, like my dad, worked 9 to 5, but still put in the time, not only with their kids, but kids in the community. And so, having them invest time in me just made me want to, pursue that craft even more, get better and better and better. And, end up, of course, we were teammates in high school, playing in college. So my dream as a child, it was baseball or bust. Yeah, for a long time. I was like, this is what I want to do. And, it wasn't even about a money thing. It was just that I love the game that much. And I still love the game. It's still my favorite sport. And I'll tell anybody to this day that baseball saved my life. Because, growing up in Vallejo, you could go one of two ways. You could play sports, or you was in the streets.
Yeah.
We had a few who were able to navigate both. Some fell victim, sadly, to the streets. But I knew I had to make a choice, and because of this gift playing baseball, it saved me from being out on the streets. And I'm forever grateful for baseball. But as I got older and in high school, we had several of our teammates get drafted and go on to the pros straight out of high school. An opportunity arisen for me to take my talents to college. And it was there where I realized, this is a tough road. And do I really want to commit, to this tough road and put this pressure, and financial pressure on my parents, because when you're trying to come up in the ranks, it's not a lot of money to be made. And so you're relying on other people to help, fund your life. And so I didn't want to put that pressure on my parents. And thank goodness I had a professor in my freshman year in college. He was able to, see another talent in me. I was taking a drama, a theater class, and it was just, an elective class. And he saw a talent in me. He said, "There's something in you." And he said, if you be in my plays, if you be in my productions every year while you're in college, and you take my class, you don't have to show up to class. I'm going to just give you an A, but I just want you in my productions. I said, say less. I'm all
Say less.
That kept my GPA up. So of course, and so I'll never forget his name, Professor Michael Gates, and he really showed me the craft of acting. He showed me the craft of not only acting but creating. And so that kind of allowed my creative juices to start flowing, not just on stage or in front of the camera, but behind that as well. And so that all of a sudden the baseball dream started to wither, and all of a sudden this dream of acting and performing and creating just began to arise. And so I started doing more singing. And I was singing in high school, but it was just something that I did. Later, I started taking it a little bit more serious along with the acting. And it was during that time after college, I started, doing some stage plays, started playing, different bands around the Bay Area. But that's a tough grind in itself as well. And you're getting older, and you got to start making some life commitments. I met, who is now my wife. I met her during that time, and we were building a family. So I knew I had to, kind of make some decisions and some sacrifices in order to, help, sustain my family. Mm-hmm. And so, I went into the workforce and things like that. And, I was blessed to eventually transition into working into higher education, work my way up to being director of financial aid for a number of different law schools. And now I'm at the University of California, Davis Law School. And so even though I had to start focusing on more of a career, those talents of acting and creating remained in me. And so I was always constantly creating, still writing songs, still, drafting scripts and things like that. And it wasn't until a few years ago, maybe about 10 years ago, my wife saw a news article about an open audition for a movie that was filming locally. And she said, "You ought to do it because you're always, creating, you're always doing skits, whether it's on social media or you're always making the family laugh or doing something like that. You have this natural gift of acting. You might as well go do it." And so I was like, all right, sure. It was a couple of blocks away from the office where I was working at the time. I said, well, I'll just go and audition on my lunch break. Didn't know I had to, prepare a script or a monologue. And so I came to the audition and just off the top of my head did a monologue that I just, basically freestyled. Mm-hmm. And they loved it. They said, "You got the part." And lo and behold, it was a part in a major motion picture called Mara, which is still available now. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. And so what it made me realize is that these talents and gifts never went away. I just made them lay dormant for a while. And so even though I had to focus on, some things that were more of a priority, it doesn't mean that the talents and the gifts and the dreams that I had as a child have to go away. Yeah, I'm older now. I can't play baseball, but doesn't mean I can't impact young players. That doesn't mean I can't be a coach. That doesn't mean I can't help train young athletes. That doesn't mean I can't, as a pastor, be a team chaplain, which I've done that before. So there are still ways that I can stay connected to the sport, contribute to the sport, contribute to the acting and the theatrical arts field as well. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades and wearing many hats now, only because I know God has blessed me with many talents. And I'm at a point now that I don't want any of my talents to go unused. So you're going to see me on several different platforms to make sure that my talent that I'm tapping into all of my talents.
That's amazing. That's powerful. A reminder to you, to everyone, and to me. Like you just spoke a word to me. Not allow any of your talents to go unused and unrecognized, unnoticed, unfulfilled. You know, there God has put things in you, and there's a reason He put them in you. And if you let them lay dormant, they will stay there and work against you to some degree. I mean, because if your life is supposed to be lived in this lane and you choose this lane, you're working against yourself. And so I appreciate that and I respect that response. It's a reminder to everyone that, despite what you might be doing now, always go back and remember that the things that were very exciting to you as a younger person doesn't mean you have to stop doing them just because age, or maybe like baseball is a thing that, at 50 years old, we're not really going to be pursuing it the same way as
Right.
we would have
Right.
did it when we were 18. But Montre just told you he's found a way, many ways, through his other areas of his life to still remain connected to baseball, or you can. He offered some opportunities where you can still remain connected to those things that you love. So I appreciate that response, because that's a reminder to anybody out there that, keep going for what you know, keep going for what you love and what you enjoy, because full circle moments happen and you're able to utilize your current pursuit, to match up with things that you enjoyed in the past and you wanted to do in the past. Um, right now, what drew you, Montre, to? I mentioned that you were a pastor and a life coach as well. What drew you to the calling of pastoring a church? Um, yeah, I'll start with that question. What drew you to the calling of pastoring a church?
Yeah, man. Actually, when going back to talking about those seeds that are planted in you at an early age, I remember, man, I had to been like 16 or 17 years old, and I had a very close relationship with both my grandmothers, but it was a really special relationship with my maternal grandmother, and I would spend weekends at her house, and I would love to just go into her bedroom, and just she would have a recliner in her bedroom, and I would just sit at her feet literally, and we would just talk, and that was the one person. Sometimes there are things that I wasn't willing to share with my parents because I didn't know how that would turn out. But those I could share anything with her, and so and she would give me answers with such wisdom and such love and care that it never felt like chastisement. It never I never felt anything like that. And so she was someone who I could always talk to. And one day I was sitting at her feet and we were just sitting there just talking and watching TV. And she said, "You know what? You gonna be a pastor one day. You gonna speak to thousands of people. You're going to speak God's word." And so I'm looking up at her. I'm like, okay, but in my mind I'm saying, well, Mama, you don't know what I did last night, so I don't think God is calling me.
Right.
I
He
don't
wasn't
think God
talking to
is
me.
calling me. So yeah, you definitely ain't talking to me. But I never forgot that. And I was born and raised in the church, and as a teenager, I was, I played the drums in the church and was, in church every week, and I would even come home on the weekends from college, just to play for my local church. And as I got older, that connection with the church, it never led. I always have had a desire to be connected to the church. And so when after getting married and my wife and I we moved to Georgia, and it was there that we joined this church, and the pastor of that church, he pretty much said the same thing that my grandmother told me like maybe 20 years prior. He said, "You know you called to preach, right?" and I'm just there, just serving, just doing whatever God is leading me to do, just trying to contribute. He said, you're called to preach, right? I was like, I don't know, I don't know. And so he never pressured me or anything like that. He
You
was
like,
just,
my grandma?
yeah, right. Do you know my grandmother? But he was just telling me to tap into those gifts, and so he opened the door for me to serve in different capacities of leadership. And so I began to see myself as a leader. I began to see myself preaching God's word. I began to see myself, one day pastoring a church. And so I'm grateful for him. Shout out to Bishop Ron Doherty for not forcing it, because sometimes things can be just forced down your throat. Because I come from a family of preachers. My great grandfather was a pastor. My uncles were pastors and preachers, and so I'm so glad that I met someone who didn't force feed it. He just opened the door and let me walk in. And so that passion for leading, passion for preaching, just it was organic. It organically grew in me, and so I was licensed and ordained, and eventually had to move to Savannah, Georgia, where I met my current pastor, Corey Williams. And he just really just did the same thing, just opened the doors of opportunity, exposed me to different spaces that I never, thought I would walk in before, meeting, some of the legends in just the Christian ministry, and being in some of those rooms. It wasn't like I wanted what they had. It was that I wanted to make the impact that they made. And so over time, the opportunities for me to step into a pastoral role and in the church, came my way, and I took it. And after serving in that role as an assistant pastor, my pastor, he trained and guided me to, go back home to California and launch a church there. And I knew how difficult it would be and things like that, but it was the biggest blessing to be able to create something, to build something, and to see people's lives transform from, someone who was once distant or didn't believe in God to now being someone who loves God and loves serving his people. So it's been an amazing transition, bro, and I'm so grateful for God calling me into this. And one thing about the call, it is truly a call, and we have the choice to answer it. Some of us choose to answer it, some of us don't. Me, I put them on hold for a number of years before I answered,
We
but I'm
all
so
guilty.
glad that I did finally answer.
We all guilty of putting God on hold. Sometimes, I mean, I'm just being honest. God knows we're human. We ask for forgiveness and we keep going. And
Yeah,
graciously, He don't put us on hold like that.
come on.
I mean,
Yes.
and if He does, it's purposeful. It's for a reason.
Yeah.
So, man, thank you for sharing that. You But you talked about your starting the church, and I do recall, if I'm recalling right, um, one of your first church. I won't call it. I don't know how to refer to it. I'm just calling it a mission
Yeah.
and vision. Was it Church Without Walls or Church Beyond Wall, something like that? Am I correct? Church with no
That was
walls.
one. That was one that I was assisting with.
Okay.
That wasn't my initial vision, but that was one of the ministries that led me to creating. Well, I shouldn't say creating, but just answering God's call to plant and launch a church here in Sacramento called Life Words Church.
Okay.
So, but I am grateful to a Church Without Walls for the title of that ministry, is really telling, because, it really, forced me to get outside the four walls of the church building and see the church for what it truly is. I mean, if we read the book of Acts, chapter 2, it tells us what the church was. It was a coming together of people, whether it was in someone's home, whether it was in the streets, wherever. And so it led me to being someone who was willing to be out in the community serving and let people see the church in me rather than a brick and mortar building.
Hmm. Very powerful. That the naming of it, Church Without Walls, and the representation of it by you, living your life outside of that building in a way that is not reflective of the edifice itself, the building itself, the church body itself, but reflective more of your relationship,
Yeah.
with God. And so, with that being said, though, how do you think that American society in general views the brick and mortar church today?
Man, it's definitely changed, man. And unfortunately, not for the better in most cases. Um, I do a lot of historical reading of the church. If you look on the bookshelf behind me, there's a lot of books on Christian history and the history of the westernized American, whether it's just this typical American Christian church or the Black Christian church. And one of the things that really stood out to me is during the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s. Whenever something happened in the community, whether it was a protest, whether someone was, unjustly arrested or beaten or lynched, whenever the news started to spread, the response of the people was, well, what did the church say? And so they would ask that question because whatever the church said about this situation, that's how we're going to respond. Whatever the church says we need to do in this situation, whether it was to protest or march or pray, whatever the church said we needed to do, that's what we're going to do. And so the community really leaned on the church for leadership. Whenever people needed something, they leaned on the church. Whenever they needed guidance, before they made it a big decision, they leaned on the church. And so we're in a place now where people just react on their own emotions and instincts, and people aren't saying no more, well, what does the church say about this situation? If I think a lot of the situations that we face nowadays, whether it's with police brutality, things going on, with what's going on at the White House in Washington D.C., we would respond a little bit differently if people ask themselves, well, what does the church say? Now, when I say that, and we'll probably get into this momentarily about my new book, when I say that, I'm not saying necessarily that the church is always right. So a lot of people's current distance from the church is justified because of some of the decisions and words that has come out of the American Christian church. But if we really went back to what the church's foundation of serving people, loving people from different backgrounds, just coming together, we can easily go back to that relationship and going to a point where we're asking that question, what does the church say? And so right now, I think for a lot of people, the relationship with the church, they have a strained relationship with the church. There's an epidemic right now of people suffering from church hurt. I like to call it church trauma because hurt is momentary. But when you experience church trauma, that lasts much longer than a momentary hurt. And so a lot of people are dealing with that because of poor leadership in the church, because of people doing what their flesh wants to do instead of what God has said for them to do. And so there are a lot of people who have decided that they don't want anything to do with the church because of they have experienced trauma. But I want to be someone. I want my ministry to be that bridge to bring people back into a healing place, to let them know that the church should be and is a safe place. And for those who have left and said, well, I don't believe, I will never go back into a church, I'm going after them as well, because, we know about the parable in the Bible where Jesus told about, the lost sheep and going after that one lost sheep, leaving the 99, leaving the masses to go after that one. And so that's where I am right now. I'm going after that one who once felt rejected, that once felt hurt and traumatized by the church, and let them know that you can heal. Because I've been hurt by the church. I'm going through some healing myself right now from experiences in the church. And so if I can go through this process of healing and not distance myself from the church, anyone else can as well.
I think it's important for us to I appreciate that response. I think it's important for us to realize that, in real life, life is not going to go perfectly. Things are going to happen in life, but that doesn't stop us from living life. I mean, some of us,
Yes.
unfortunately, it does. If you go the suicide route, but it doesn't stop us from living life. In the same way, your relationship with the church, there might be some flaws in the way, some way, but maybe it shouldn't stop you from necessarily going. I appreciate your response. I think many of us as Americans have fallen victim to um, things that may have occurred to, maybe not to ourselves, to someone else, in the church. When I say fallen victim, the mentality that maybe that's not a place I want to be, or I want to keep
Yeah.
going, or I want to get fed, filled or fed. I've been in that place, so I appreciate you saying that, because anybody watching, you're talking to a man of God, a man of faith, someone who is, promoting the message of valuing what the church has to offer, while also realizing that there's some things in there that could steer someone left or right, and
Yeah.
but yet it's still important to discover your relationship and stay strong in your faith, right? I know you got
Absolutely.
more to say on that. I know you do. We're going to get into that in your book, but I got just a piggyback question off of that. Based on your response and what you just talked about, the American church, recently, and I'm kind of put you on the spot a little bit. Recently, the viral moment when Minister Marvin Sapp closed the doors of the church during a time of giving and a time of offering. There was a lot of uh, public scrutiny and feedback toward
Yeah.
the church, toward him, toward religion in a lot of different ways. What is your take on that situation, with how it occurred and on it occurring, during a time of offering, where
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you give your
Yeah.
take. I'm not gonna give my commentary on it. What's your take on
Yeah,
it?
no worries. It's important, and I always share this with people. It's important that we not only know the content, but it's even more important that we know the context. Because if we just see the context, we see this 30-second clip and we go off of that. But we have to understand the context of it as well, because for those of us who grew up in the African American church, we know that offering is not only a sacred time, but it's also a time of high security as well. And so I know growing up in church that when it was time for offering, the ushers did close the doors to make sure that there wasn't a lot of movement, because you never know if there's someone who's desperate, who may you got an offering plate going around with stacks of cash in it, and so you never know what someone's state of mind, especially nowadays. You never know what someone's state of mind is, and if they just grab that and go. So I get that side of it when you direct ushers to shut the door. However, there is another side of this where I have to disagree with what Bishop Sapp did. And don't get me wrong, I love Bishop Marvin Sapp, love his ministry, I love his music. I've listened to many, not only his songs, but his messages as well. Powerful, powerful sermons that I believe that if we truly listen, we'll get a lot out of some of the sermons that he's preached. Um, but this was at a conference, and if you listen to what he said before he said close the doors, he was saying that we needed people to give. We needed people to give. I believe he was asking for $20 from everyone in there and everyone watching online, because they had to meet the costs and expenses of this conference. And so that's where I kind of disagree, because if you're hosting a conference, that means you should have had all those expenses paid and covered for at the beginning. Your lack of planning, shouldn't constitute an emergency for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're asking people to help you meet the cost of this conference. It sounds like a desperation move. And so one of the things that I've always done as a pastor, I never had those. I don't do special offerings. I trust the people who are there or the people who are watching online. If they feel connected to this ministry, if they feel committed to this ministry, they will give because that's what we're supposed to do. But I don't want to pressure anyone to give because that goes against what the Bible says about being a cheerful giver. If you're pressuring me saying, well, we need you to give $20, we need you to give $100, come to the front and give it feels more like a pressure move rather than me giving from my heart, me giving cheerfully. And so it's not, a criticism just on Marvin Sapp, but any pastor who is out there, doing these special offerings. I grew up seeing that. We still need $1,000. I believe that there's someone here who can give $1,000 seed, and so that makes the people who can't give that $1,000 seed, that makes them feel some type of way. Well, God must not be blessing me because I can't give this seed, and so it makes people it's guilting people into giving. So that's where I have the disagreement with Bishop Sapp. It's not like they were in a church and because ushers know to close the doors during offering time, but you're in a conference room and you're telling people to shut the doors, basically telling people don't leave until you give these $20. And he's recognized that he could have did that differently. And sometimes because we're in a mode of desperation in the church as church leaders to sometimes meet costs because there is a business side to the church, that what we say from the pulpit when it comes to offering can sometimes come out a little too forceful. And I think for him in that situation, it came out much too forceful. And it almost felt like, he was holding people hostage, even though that wasn't his intent. It sounds that way. But again, it goes back to understanding the context and not just the content.
He is a human being, and he deserves to be given the opportunity to express what his intent was and what he was doing, what he meant by it. I appreciate you delivering that context and that clarification, because many of us watching, I didn't even see it from that perspective. I did tune in enough to know that it was a conference and was not in a church during a church service. But the context that you provided, that there is a measure of security that is important during the time of offering and giving at churches because of the amount of money that could be cash that could be funneled around hand to hand. So I do understand that perspective, and that maybe enlightens some people to some other viewpoints that they may not have considered in this case, in this scenario. So I appreciate that. And I do, I'm not going to offer my agreement on opinion, but I will say this: I do agree that God loves a cheerful giver. Let's just say that. Yeah. And so if I'm being pressed to give, I don't know if I'm giving cheerfully. That's all. That's my only comment.
Actually, bro, I'm not giving if I'm being pressed to give.
Right, because it's not in my spirit. Look, I feel blessed when I give out of my spirit. When I'm being pressed to give, I'm just doing something, and I'm not going to get the benefit out of it because I'm not doing it with a giving heart. I don't want to give you this, but you making me, so I'm gonna give it to you. God ain't gonna bless that.
Right. He ain't gonna bless that.
God ain't gonna bless that. So you might be better off holding that dollar in your pocket at that moment, and then give it, the next day or the next church service. All right, man. Yes. I appreciate your take on that. You've recently, let's get more into your stuff. You've recently authored and published your second book, which is sitting right behind you right now on the shelf. It's called Divorcing the Church to Marry God. With a variety of possible mediums available to you, social media, all type technology, why choose to release, your intellectual property and your passion in the form of a book as opposed to some other medium that you could have chosen? Why a book? Because you sing, you acted, you put out other types of social media content. Why a book?
Yeah, because the love for reading, man, was instilled in me at a very young age. I remember my paternal grandmother in the summertime while I'm out of school, she would make me do a book report every week in the summer, and provide a full breakdown, a synopsis of the books. And so at first it felt like, this was punishment. But as I began reading, I was like, I like this. And some of those books that I was reading were maybe, well, definitely written before I was born. Some maybe even, a century before I was born, especially like some of the history books. And so once I began writing books, like you said, I have a large following on different social media platforms. And there's so much that I could do, nowadays with, streaming and podcasts and things like that. And I do, delve into those things. But I wanted to do a book, one as a way of honoring my grandmother, for instilling that love of reading into me, which ended up being downloaded into my daughter because she loves to read. So it's almost like I'm honoring my grandmother and my daughter. And actually, the dedication in my latest book is to my daughter. Um, but to me, books are forever. Like right now with social media, we there are hundreds of hundreds of millions of people just in America alone with a social media platform. There are, it's hard to find, a podcast and commit to it, because as soon as you start watching one podcast, there's somebody else coming out with another. And so that's why I appreciate what you're doing, because so many of us who really are trying to put out some good content, sometimes we can get lost in the shuffle because is a athlete or a celebrity out there doing it. But with me, even still doing podcasts, I wanted to do a book because I wanted something that I knew would always last. Like, so I could put something out on social media. Who knows if Mark Zuckerberg, get mad one day and want to push the delete button and everything, everything is gone, from Facebook and Instagram. You know what I mean? But with writing a book, and like my latest book, I can have it in my hand and I can give that to someone. I can hand that over from generation to generation. My daughter, she can tell her children, your grandfather wrote this, your great grandfather wrote this. And it could be almost like a family heirloom. And so I wanted to, to make sure that I had something physical, something tangible, that could be passed on, well after I'm gone. And books are those things that do that. We weren't around when Dr. King was, giving his speeches and, writing his speeches and things like that. But we can read his speeches because there's now a book with his speeches. We can read about, our rich Black history because there are books. And a lot of the things that we see on social media that shares our rich history comes from a book. So why not just knock out the middleman and just create a book? And so that was why I decided, this is something that is going to be really special to me. Something that, there's a lot of people out there who are old school, who still like, to flip through the pages of a book. So I'm making sure that I'm serving those people as well.
Man, you're serving everybody, in that writing a book, because one thing that you just mentioned to me that I didn't really take into account as much is the book will be here forever. Your platform, even this social media platform, even this video, I could put on YouTube and YouTube could decide tomorrow, we done with this, and therefore I don't have a platform anymore. But that book, once somebody purchases it and it's sitting on their shelf, they may have read it, they may not have read it, but that book is alive. Those words are alive forever, and it could go all around the world. You can have people in so many different countries that have a little piece of Montre Everett's mind, sitting on their shelf, and that's permanent. Absolutely. That's forever, man. I respect that. Yeah, man. I want to write a book one day. I started a book. I actually started a book on my alma mater. I don't want to dive in too much. 1912. Tennessee State University. Shout out to you. But, I don't want to dive in too much, or one of my fellow classmates might take my idea. I got to finish the book because it's on me if I don't finish the book and they steal it. So,
That's
You've been
it.
featured.
That's it.
You've been featured in a couple films, Montre. You mentioned Mara earlier, and you've authored a few books. I think you authored a ebook in the past as well. And you seem to be
Yeah.
very active on social media, creating a bunch of different types of content. Some of it humorous, some of it educational, some of it just you and the Lord, preaching, spreading the message.
Yeah.
Um, where do your creative gifts and talents come from?
Oh, that I'm about to make you laugh, but I mean, it started back in Vallejo. Those family get-togethers on Fridays and Saturday evenings, and my family, my family really should have been the Wayans family before the Wayans family.
Word.
Like my aunts and uncles, they can sing, they make everybody laugh. I mean, just straight up naturally hilarious. I mean, like gut busting laughs. And so I grew up watching that. And so I started just doing what they were doing. I was making kids in the neighborhood laugh. I started doing, the singing and the dancing and the skits. And then Michael Jackson bust on the scene in the 80s, and Thriller came out. And I learned that the whole Thriller video, I learned it from beginning to end. And so whenever, and I also Billie Jean and Beat It too. And so
Mm-hmm.
whenever we had, back in the day, we used to call it, when guests come over, we call it company. So whenever company came over,
Yeah.
the family would say, Montre, come on, come on, come on. Do the Michael Jackson. And so,
You the entertainment
back
for
in
the
the
company.
day, I had the Jerry curl. And so they would make me do Billie Jean, Thriller, or whatever. And so I'm doing these dances and these skits and things like that. And so they would always applaud and say, sometimes, I have an uncle give me $1 here or $1 there. I'm like, oh, wait, you want me to do some more?
Yeah, yeah,
I'll
for
do
real.
some more.
I like
And
the way
so
this
that,
feels.
yeah, I like this feeling. So that planted the seed in me for just performing, creating, in many different avenues. And growing up after that, you know, being in a singing group in high school, and then just expanding that more into acting. Once I got to college, so that love for creativity, performing arts, has always been there. And once I matured, I realized it's not really that this is just something that I just love to do because I'm just naturally good at it. I get I get a satisfaction from seeing other people happy. And so if I can make somebody laugh, so if you're on my TikTok, and I'm doing these funny videos, and to see people comment, oh, I'm laughing so hard, I'm literally in tears from laughing, or sometimes they'll say, I needed that laugh. That keeps me going. That keeps
Mm-hmm.
me going. And so that's why you see so much from me, and you don't see me just going in one particular lane. So you're going to see me do funny videos to make people laugh, but I'm also going to make you think. I'm also going to do some videos to encourage you and inspire you, because I feed off of that as well. It's a blessing, to have a gift, to have a word for someone when they need it. And so be able to give an encouraging or an inspiring word, and have somebody come back and say, you really blessed me and you really encouraged me to really chase my dreams. That means a lot to me. And so you're going to also get that. But I'm also going to challenge you. That's where the name Coach Trey comes from. It started, of course, with me being, coaching baseball. But after transitioning into a life coach, the thing about being a life coach is to challenge people to be better. And so I'm going to make sure that, in my content on social media, that I also challenge you, challenge your thoughts. You may think, we always think that we're right when we're sharing our comments, but I'm going to challenge you on that to make you kind of do a little bit of inventory on your thoughts. And so you're going to get some of that from me as well. So you're going to get, the laughing, you're going to get the inspiration, you definitely going to get some guide, and you're going to get somebody who's willing to coach you, to be a better person.
Yeah, man. I like the way that you film some of your content. I see that you have some kind of directorial capabilities. I
Yeah.
notice I'm a creative, so I notice everything. I notice when
Yeah.
you film in your car. I notice when you're filming outside or in your home. I notice when it's a personal, funny thing. The camera angles like from up here. And you kind of
Yeah.
looking up into the camera. Your last post about I ain't gonna say the name of the place, but the pickle juice food was funny. I thought that was funny. So man, that's why I asked that question. I know a lot of people. I ain't the only one that laughs and gets something out of it. People that know you from high school or know you from college, but maybe not knew you had this creative gift or this funny gene in you. Now know a little bit more about where that comes from. You and your
Absolutely.
family,
I'm gonna
man.
keep on doing it to the day I die, man. I love it.
I appreciate it. It keeps you youthful and young. And when I'm looking at it, it does the same thing for me. It's like, okay, Montrey is my age. Montrey is not afraid to put himself out there in a comedic way, in a way that is almost is sometimes you humbly humiliate yourself for the
Yeah.
comedic value of the audience, and I respect that. Not everybody's able or willing to do that.
Well,
So that's
I
dope.
really learned it because, when you were saying how you kind of watch not only just to be entertained, but, as being a creative as well, you kind of see some of the behind the scenes work that it takes to create that. And so I always, try to be a student of the craft, whatever it is, whether it's, preaching, whether it's acting, whether it's comedy, whatever it is. I want to make sure that I'm honoring the craft by learning the craft and understanding the craft. So, even when I'm doing something funny, I reflect on what I've seen from, people like Kevin Hart, Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy. A lot of what makes them funny is because they're basically talking about themselves and,
Hmm.
and laughing about themselves. And so sometimes, people can take themselves a little bit too seriously, but here the greatest comedians can stop taking themselves seriously and make the joke about them. And so
Hmm.
when I talk about like the pickle juice situation, I made the joke about me because if I can't laugh at myself and the crazy things that I do, how can I laugh at someone else? And when I see someone on the street and they do something that's funny or they fall to the ground, when I can't even laugh at myself when I fall on the ground.
Yeah, yeah, man, powerful, man. I think if you're getting something out of it, what you probably are downloading in your spirit right now is humility and being light,
Absolutely.
like not
Yeah.
taking things so seriously, realizing that your life, every aspect of it, the good, the bad, the trials, and everything is an opportunity for you to bless somebody else by just being yourself. 100%
Yes.
authentically you. I appreciate that out of you, Montre. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. Um, you you and your family have overcome unthinkable, and when you had a significant loss of your son years ago, how has the celebration though of his life fueled your ambitions?
Yeah. Well, that was the I mean, without saying, the most difficult day of our lives. Um, and the way that it happened, my son passed away on January 2nd, 2019. So to go from one of the most celebratory days that we have on the calendar, New Year's Day, to 24 hours later being the worst day of our lives, uh, was just an emotional roller coaster in itself. And the way that we decided to kind of and let me just say this because I know there's someone out there who's watching this who's probably going through grief right now or has gone through a period of losing a loved one. You never get over grief. You never heal from grief. You just know how to live with the grief a little bit better each day. Some days, that's why I call grief a roller coaster. Some days you're good, some days you're not, and it's just up and down, up and down. But through therapy, for one, definitely, I recommend anybody go everyone to go through grief therapy. But through prayer, through having people around you who are just willing to just support you, sit with you, not really tell you what to do, because if anybody is telling you, just to get over it, or one day you'll be fine, they're not giving you the right advice. Sometimes we just need somebody to be present, not to really say nothing, but just to be present. And I'm so thankful that I had people who were just willing to just be present and just let me go through, my period of grief. But you learn to just live with it a little bit easier. And so the way we decided to celebrate our son's life, now that it's been, a few years since his passing, is that we remember who he was and who he is in us still today. My son Reggie was a beautiful and wonderful soul. He was one who loved to go to church with me. I would get up in the mornings on Sunday mornings, because I was in a leadership role. Of course, I had to get there before everyone else, and he would already be up, already fixed coffee and everything, ready to leave out the door with me, because he was that devoted and committed, just a loving and giving heart. And so now, remembering him, I want to carry that heart with me. And so that motivates me to be more of a servant rather than always having to be the leader, or at least being a servant leader. That motivates me into always wanting to look out for other people more than I look out for myself. That makes me just want to be there for my family, because he loved being around family. One of my fondest memories was the last Christmas that we celebrated together, and he kind of took after me, even though he was kind of quiet and shy. All of a sudden, this last Christmas, he broke out of his shell and started dancing and doing skits and performing, doing karaoke with the rest of us. And so I don't look back on the day he died. I look back on how he lived. And so if I could be of any encouragement to anyone who's going through grief, put more of your focus on how your loved one lived rather than how they died, because that can really put us in a pit if all that we reflect on is that moment. And it is just a moment. But the way they live, that's a lifetime. That's eternal. And so we find so many ways to make sure that we're honoring his life through service. Last month, locally here in Sacramento, we were part of an event to plant trees in a local park, and we allowed people who had lost loved ones, other parents who have lost children, to plant a tree in memory of their child. And so to be able to plant a tree in memory of our son alongside other parents who have lost a child, it helped us understand that we're not on this grief journey alone. There are many others who are experiencing the same thing that we're going through, and we need each other. People need people. You cannot get through any traumatic moment in your life alone. We can try it. We can say that, I got this on my own. No, we don't. People need people. And so we're doing our part to make sure that our son's life, his name, and his legacy lives on through acts of kindness and acts of service.
Yeah, very. Someone's life is a powerful thing, when they're here and when they're no longer here. If you value it in the proper perspective, if you look at it in the proper perspective, like you mentioned, instead of focusing on the day that they left here, focus on all the days that they lived while they were here and what they did during that journey. That's the fuel. That's the joy. That's where the pride comes in. And if you stay stuck on that one moment when they left, it's hard to even honor your deceased loved one for what they were accomplishing or what they were doing or who they were, because you're not focused on the right thing. You're focused on the day they left, as opposed to all the days that they spent while they were here and what that meant to you. And so I appreciate that, and you're using that as fuel, to fuel your ambitions, to carry on his spirit and his energy. And I asked that question for a reason because there are a lot of people who have lost children or lost loved ones who they're using that loss as a reason to not pursue their dreams, and
Yeah,
as opposed to using it as fuel to pursue their dreams. And so I appreciate your response there.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
when Montrey is done celebrating his final years on this earth, what impact would you have hoped to make?
Wow. I really just want to make my name count for something. One of the quotes that I always have lived by, and I keep it pinned up somewhere close by at all times, is a quote. I don't even know who wrote this. I don't even know where I saw it, but I haven't forgotten it after decades of since I've seen it for the first time. But the quote says, "Create your legacy and make your name count." And that really stuck to me because that's all I want to do. I don't have to be, you know, as well spoken as Dr. King. I don't have to have the theatrical gifts of a Denzel Washington. Um, I don't have to make, the difference that say a Gandhi made or someone like that. I just want my name to count for something. And so that the people who knew me, the people who know me, the people who heard my name in passing can say, yeah, I remember him. I remember what he did. And so that's what it's about for me, just creating making my name count for something and creating that legacy. I want I want, my family to be able to carry my name forward and share my accomplishments and the things that I've done with grandchildren, great grandchildren, great great grandchildren that I may never meet. That's what a legacy is making sure that you pass something on. Sometimes, yeah, it's great to pass on money. It's great to pass on real estate. It's great to pass on tangible physical things. But when you can pass on a name that brings pride, or brings a smile to someone's face. To me, that's more valuable than anything else. And so that's really important to me to make sure that I'm creating that name for myself, because it's one thing to have my wife and my children remember me fondly, but for that lady who I once ran into in the grocery store, who I never saw again, but she knew my name, and for her to remember me and tell somebody else about me, that's an impact that's only done by God. And so that's so vital to me that I create that legacy.
Yes, yeah. Leaving, you mentioned writing a book earlier, and that the book becomes something that you leave behind that is forever. And that legacy that you're creating is forever, especially
Yeah,
if you leave a positive impact and it impacts your family for generations, whether it's financial, whether it's just namesake, whether it's just experience that they can draw off of. You're
hmm,
creating that right now. And it's important for us to remember what we're doing and why we're doing it. And a lot of times it goes beyond our own individual selves. Like uh, when you're in the pursuit of your dreams, a lot of times you got to be um, selfish and selfless at the same time. You got to be
absolutely.
selfish in your pursuit. Like, I'm not going to be derailed from this pursuit, but you also have to realize that it goes beyond you. When you get discouraged, you got to think about who you're doing it for, who is going to benefit in the future. And most of the time, if you're real honest, it's not just about you. It's always about
Yes,
other people.
yes,
Even if it's just
absolutely.
family
That
member or the
that's
people you're
key.
providing the income for or something, it's always about somebody else.
Yeah, always. And it just goes back, to what we see, biblically, and who we say that we trust and believe in, Jesus Christ. Yeah, he was a leader. Yeah, he had people serve him, but he was more of a servant to anyone else. And so that should be the principle with anyone who wants to have their name count for anything, to be a leader, is to make sure that word servant is before that word leader, and being that servant leader, thinking about others, because like you said, the impact that you make on people, we don't realize the impact that we make on people. We make an impact on people every single day and not even know it.
Mm-hmm.
The person that we lock eyes with, they may needed that eye contact. And so if we're looking at them funny, I know sometimes we walk around, especially sometimes us as men, we got our guard up oftentimes. And so sometimes we have this scowl on our face. But that person who may need a smile and we didn't give them one, we don't know what how their life could have been changed if they would have just saw a smile from us. And so we're making that impact every single day. So I'm trying to be mindful of that every single day that I walk out of this house, that I'm going to run into somebody that I'm going to make an impact on their life, whether I know it or not.
Mm-hmm. And being open to that reality that God's going to probably put somebody in your way intentionally so you can make that impact. So you got to be open to the possibility of that occurring so that you're prepared for Absolutely. It. When it does occur, I'm not going to not smile. I'm going to smile. Somebody look at me and make eye contact with me, I'm going to go ahead and smile. That might be my opportunity, to change somebody's life,
Yes.
Man, Montrey, what would you tell someone who believes that they're too old to pursue their dreams or that time has passed them by? It's too late.
You know what? I've told myself that. And so, for anyone who has said that, I can come from a space of saying, me too, because I've thought that. I've thought, well, I'm too old for this. When it came to acting, I'm too old for this. I got too many other priorities. It's too late. Those opportunities have passed me by. And my cousin, my younger cousin, so it's not like we can't young from younger people. He said, look on TV. You see people acting from infancy to almost near the time of their demise. I say, you're right. It's never too late, especially when it comes to when it comes to acting or in the performing arts, because there's a production that need a 90-year-old man in a scene. There's a production that needs a 50-year-old black bald headed guy, and so it's never too late when it comes to that realm, and it's never too late in other arenas as well. It may look a little different than maybe it would have looked like for you 20, 30 years ago, but it's still never too late to tap into that gift and that talent that God has placed into you. We talked about earlier how it's too late for me to pursue a career playing on the baseball field, but doesn't mean it's not too late for me to still be a part of a team. It's not too late for me to still contribute to the sport of baseball or sports in general. And people sometimes think, well, I once had this dream of opening a business, but I'm too old now. I can't deal with that. You're not too old. As long as there's breath in your body, you're not too old, because a lot of the businesses that we create nowadays, we can do from the comforts of our home. It doesn't have to be a brick and mortar type of situation. I know people who are making six figures or more just where I am right now, sitting in their office. And so if we just limit ourselves to how we saw the dream 20, 30 years ago, it'll seem like it's too late. But if we open our perspective a little bit and see the world for the bigger world that it really is, instead of this tunnel vision, we'll see all these different opportunities to still pursue our passions. Like for me, when we had to make the tough decision last year to close our church, we had to shut the doors, literally shut the doors of the church. If I would have had the mindset 20, 30 years ago, the church doors are shut, I'm done with ministry. But now there are so many different avenues, social media, YouTube, podcasts, so many different ways I can go, writing books, that ministry doesn't stop. The doors may close, but ministry doesn't stop. The church continues. The movement of the church continues. So no matter what it is that you're trying to pursue, it's Never too late. It doesn't matter what field you're trying to get into. You're never too old to stop learning. You're never too old to stop learning a new craft, a new skill. I make it a goal of mine to learn something new every month. Do something I never did before. Learn it and do it once a month. Sometimes it may be, I've never done a garden before. I went on YouTube and learned how to start gardening. And so I have a small flower garden outside. Or if I want to learn how to build a deck or repair my fence, learn something new once a month, and you will realize that over a year's time, I've learned 12 new skills. And one of those 12 new skills that I learned, I could probably monetize it. I could probably monetize this and do something, because one of the best pieces of advice I was given, and I'll end with this, one of the best pieces of advice I was given was somebody said, take every gift that you have and monetize it. And so I said, well, I've been giving, advice to people. I've been advising people, consulting them, giving this away for free for far too long. Let me get certified as a life coach and monetize these skills and gifts that I have. And so there are ways for you to have a lucrative career off of things that you already know how to do. And so it's never too late. We're just believing the lie that it's too late.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely is a lie. It definitely is a farce, a fallacy to believe that it's too late. It's important to revisit your dreams, but when you revisit your dreams and you get back to that point of your realizing that dream, now you have to adapt that dream to today, adapt it to your circumstance and your situation today. It doesn't mean that because that dream was 20, 30 years ago that it's impossible. And 20, 30 years ago, like Montrey said, that dream could have been, the way that it was set for you to pursue that dream 20 years ago, that might not even be sustainable in today's time. But technology is advanced and resources have advanced. And so now let me see how I can pursue this dream with today's technology, with what's available to me today. The way I thought about it 20 years ago, maybe the company that I used to be able to go to help me get this dream off the ground doesn't exist anymore. And if I look at it from that perspective, then my dreams don't exist anymore. But the dream is still there. So how can I make that dream happen in today's space and create this, legacy, or monetize it, or fulfill the calling? And that's just by pursuing the dream and adapting it to today's times. You have provided a lot of very very practical and valuable ways to look at someone's circumstance, to look at someone's dreams, their goals. I appreciate that. We're almost done here, Montrey. I'm gonna get you out of here with a couple more. But if you could offer a single phrase or a quote or a mantra or a scripture to everyone that you meet, if you knew that they would take heed to it. So if everyone that you meet, you would tell this to, and you knew that they would take heed to it, what would be the words that you would tell them?
Oh, that's a simple one, because it's one that I live by, is one that I've taught to my children, and I pray that they live by it as well. And it starts off with just two simple words: be better. And to expand that, the full mantra is this: be better today. Be better today than you were yesterday. Be better tomorrow than you are today. And what that is telling us that every day I should be striving for improvement. None of us will ever be perfect. But imagine if each day you reflected on the day and said what went well and what didn't. And for those things that didn't go well, how can I do them better tomorrow? How can I improve on them tomorrow? And even for the things that went well, how can I maintain this level of consistency of doing things well? We're both sports fans. We look at some of our favorite athletes. One of my favorites, if I could turn the camera around, I got a big mural of Kobe Bryant. One of my favorite athletes. And one thing about Kobe, if we look at his performance on the court, we see that he did everything well. And so he would say, that even when he scored 81 points, that monumentous game where he scored 81 points, he went back to the gym that next morning, 4:30 in the morning. He was back in the gym saying, how can I maintain that level of greatness? Now that I've set the bar so high for myself, how do I maintain that? And for the times that I failed, because even though he scored 81 points, he probably still missed 15 to 20 shots. How do I improve on those missed opportunities, those missed shots? And so I took his words and just used that and applied it to my daily life on everything. How do I become a better husband? Maybe today was a good day with my wife, but how do I make tomorrow even better? How do I be a better father? How do I be a better leader in my community? And so with every area of my life, I just want to be better today than I was yesterday.
That's very practical, extremely practical. Because it's incremental. It's one day. It's a 24-hour span,
One day.
and each of us, if we take an inventory of what we did yesterday, and say, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? The good things, I want to continue to do those today. The bad
Yeah.
things, let me correct that so I don't make that same mistake again today. The ugly, what can I do to prepare myself to prevent the ugly from happening ever again? And that's
Yes.
preparing yourself to be incrementally better each day than you were yesterday. I appreciate that word, Montre. The whole purpose of this show, again, is to motivate, to encourage, to inspire, and for people to share the trials and errors and their successes. We realize that the destination is just a spot on the map, but the journey is where you're going to get the fulfillment. The journey is where you're going to grow. The journey is where you're going to make an impact. The journey is where you're going to be fulfilled inside. That destination might make you happy when you get there, but if somebody just planted you there and you didn't have to put any work to get there, it won't fulfill
Yes.
you for a long period of time. You'll be looking on to the next thing that you can do because you didn't value how you got to the place that you're at right now. So that's the whole purpose of this show, Revisit Your Dreams. Montre, I got one last thing, and then I'm going to get you out of here. It's a bonus content question that I like to call, What's Your Rush? As in Mount Rushmore. As you know, Mount Rushmore has four iconic images or four iconic faces on it. And so my question to you is, what is your Mount Rushmore of the four individuals that have made the most that have inspired you the most along your journey?
Mm. Ooh, that's a good one. Um, I would definitely put. I'm going to put my two grandfathers on there for sure, Willie Mills and Edison Everett, and I'm going to put them on the two ends of my Mount Rushmore because both of them um, just planted seeds, different types of seeds in me. My maternal grandfather, Willie Mills, because of his level of resilience, he brought his family from the segregated South to California to have a opportunity to just live a safe and free life and a better life. Uh, he packed up a station wagon in 1965 with his wife and his six kids and just $50 in his pocket and built a legacy. Made it to California and built a legacy that still lives on today. So I will forever admire that level of resilience, that level of commitment to family. And my paternal grandfather, Edison Everett, because of I think that's where I get my creative skills from. He was by trade an electrician, but created so many things around the house, useful things around the house that I wish, if I had the knowledge today, I would have took those things from him and had them patented, and that it could probably useful tools that millions of people around the world could use today. So he was very creative and useful with his hands. So I'm grateful for those two. I would also put my dad, Ernest Everett, on my Mount Rushmore, only because of his perseverance and his overcoming spirit. You know, my dad had some struggles as I was a child and a young adult. Had some struggles with drug use and things like that. But when I look at him today, you know, a man who a lot of people in this world and in society would have counted out or would have disregarded. He went from, you know, having, you know, his struggles with drug use to nowadays, when I look at my cell phone and anyone else who holds their cell phone in their hand, I think of my dad, because now today he designs the microchips that are in a lot of the cell phones that we use today.
Wow.
And so it's an amazing story of just overcoming beating the odds and us just overcoming your circumstances and healing. So he's definitely on there. And lastly, I would put one of my mentors, one of my first mentors, L.J. Johnson, from Vallejo, California. He was one of the older men at the church I grew up at, Taylor Chapel CME Church in Vallejo, and he really took me under his wing. You know, really spoke, you know, some words into me that let me see that I could be more than just just my surroundings, because he saw, you know, what was happening in the neighborhood. He saw the transition that was happening, and, you know, the spike in crime and things like that. But he always told me that I was better than all of that. And just the way he lived his life, you know, being a leader, teaching me leadership skills, you know, I'll be forever grateful for him for doing that, you know. And you know, because a lot of times nowadays young people don't have anyone who's not in their family willing to take them under their wing. And so I'm glad to have him as someone who was able to do that for me. So that would be my rush. I like that question though.
Yeah, that's your rush, man. I respect that rush. I ask that question to every guest. I like to hear what people's who they were inspired by, and what I find in most people, that the majority of the people on their Mount Rushmore is someone in their family that has done something that has motivated them, that has encouraged them, has pushed them, that has inspired them. And the purpose of me asking that question, it doesn't matter who each individual is inspired by, but, you know, the viewing audience, you get to see that many people are inspired by people that are around them every day. They're inspired by people that they've had a relationship with for years. They're inspired by people that know them inside and out. It's not necessary, and there's nothing wrong with being inspired by a celebrity or being inspired by a dignitary of some sort. You know, I'm inspired by many different things. I got a book right over here, Ali on Ali. That's one of my biggest inspirations, is Muhammad Ali. You know,
Yeah.
he might be on my Mount Rushmore, but I also got parents and, you know, uncles and aunts and friends that have done some great things that have inspired me as well. It's too bad that a Mount Rushmore only got four spots on
Right.
it. You know, most people like,
I
man,
need Mount Everest because it's a lot of.
exactly. I need to have. Can I get a basketball team size mountain? I need like 16 slots.
Exactly.
Um, Man, Montre, this has been great, man. I thank you for the time, but I'm going to give you the platform now. This is an opportunity for you to let our audience know everything you want them to know about you. Where can they find Montre? How can they look you up? What you got coming out? Talk about your book. The platform is yours.
Man, I appreciate it, and as always, you know, our bond is never ending. So, man, I just thank you for reaching out and just wanting me, you know, to be a part of, you know, your platform and what you're doing. And I'm gonna definitely ask you to return the favor very soon. So I'll be reaching out to you soon.
For sure.
But yeah, man, you can find me definitely on social media. I go by Hey Coach Trey, so it makes it simple for anyone to find me. On Instagram, I'm on Facebook. TikTok is where I do a lot of the stuff. I have my largest following is on TikTok, so you can find me on most social media platforms at Hey Coach Trey. I also have a website, heycoachtrey.com, where if anyone is having some type of event, need someone to host the event or speak at the event, I do speaking engagements all across the country. So you can reach out to me and book me for your next event. And you can also, because I am also a certified life coach, if anyone wants one-on-one life coaching or wants to take one of my coaching courses, information about that is on my website. And finally, of course, you can purchase my new book, Divorcing Church to Marry God. It's available. It's great that we're doing this podcast because at the time that we're recording this, midnight tonight, the podcast, I'm sorry, the book releases. So by the time people see this podcast, the book will be available on different platforms. But I'm encouraging people to purchase the book, order the book on my website, heycoachtrey.com, because I'm signing every single copy that is purchased on my website. So the book is available now. It's also available on Amazon. And I know the title can sometimes rub people the wrong way, especially people who are in the church. It's not that this book is telling people to literally divorce the church and leave the church. This is not an indictment on the church. It's actually my love letter to the church. I love the church. I love what the church stands for. I love the foundation of the church. But like we talked about earlier, there are some things that the church has done that we need to improve on. There's some things that we can do a lot better. So this is my love letter to the church, is saying, hey, I love you, but there's some things that we got to do better on. And so I really hope that people won't judge the book by the title, but I hope that they take the time to read the book. I'm pretty sure that they'll get something out of this book that will bless them, whether they're connected to the church or disconnected from the church. This book, I'm pretty sure, will be a blessing to everyone.
Yes, yeah. Montrey, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for sharing everything that you've shared. If you're watching today, you're looking at someone who has overcome some challenging things in their lives. Even recently, you're looking at someone who's ambitious, someone who had a dream of helping people, to representing themselves in a way that they saw their grandparents and family members representing. So I appreciate that. I hope that you've got some from this. Again, I ask you to subscribe to this channel. Make sure that you share this episode, like it and share it. I know that Coach Trey has dropped a gem or a nugget of information or inspiration on you, that someone out there who can be inspired by this. Someone who played baseball, somebody who's writing a book, someone who acted, someone who likes creating content, somebody who has a child that they may have lost or something. I know that there's an aspect of Coach Trey's life, because we shared a lot of different things, that someone can be inspired by. So like, subscribe, and share. Again, this is the Revisit Your Dreams channel. Our episodes will air every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Revisit Your Dreams channel on YouTube.com. My name is Still Chill Leroy. Johnnie King III is my birth name. Still Chill Leroy is what I go by. That is Coach Montre Everett. This has been the Revisit Your Dreams podcast. We look forward to hosting you on another episode. Thank you, Coach Montre, for being with us. We out.